You're listening to Speaking Sidemount, the podcast where we talk all things sidemount diving, from equipment, skills, techniques, and sidemount diving expeditions to interviews with some of the world's top sidemount divers. Whether you're new to sidemount, been sidemount diving for years, or just want to know more, this is the place for all things sidemount. I'm your host, Steve Davis. Let's get wet. Hey, welcome back to Speaking Sidemount. I'm Steve Davis. This episode is brought to you with the support of our brilliant sponsor X-Deep and the patrons of Speaking Sidemount. Huge thanks to both for their support. We live in tough times. Many in our world have and are suffering physically and economically due to the pandemic. But our friends in Ukraine are foremost in our minds as they endure and fight against what can only be described as a barbaric and totally unnecessary invasion by Putin and the Russian military. Due to our abject condemnation of this invasion, the Russian government has added New Zealand, along with most of the Western world, to a list of nations unfriendly to Russia. I think this mischaracterizes our position. I've only met a few Russians, but despite pretty large differences in culture, language, history, and our geographical homelands, I've found them to be not so different from us. They love, they care for their families, they have hopes for the future, and plenty of them dive around the world. I've always enjoyed their company. Our opposition is not of the Russian people, but rather of the Putin regime that somehow thinks that invading a neighboring sovereign nation with no regard to the harm to children and innocents somehow enhances their security. I can't help but think it does the very opposite. I know that freedom of speech and gathering is difficult, if not prohibited, in Russia, but I can only hope that enough Russians see the pain and suffering that Putin and their military are inflicting on their neighbor and the threat that this makes to the entire world to put a stop to Putin, and by extension, a stop to this terrible war. I saw a few days ago that X-Deep has stepped up and is ceasing to operate in Russia and Belarus. I congratulate them for standing by their values, and I hope that others in the dive industry follow. I'm not sure how much of a difference this will really make, but standing by and doing nothing is not an option. In that sense, I sincerely hope that the world remains committed to its opposition to this atrocity, and that we can find a way to end this war and support the Ukrainian people to recover and rebuild. Let's move on with this episode. I'm really happy to be able to bring you another episode featuring Stratis Kas. In addition to being a stellar cave diver and instructor who in his own words is as passionate about sidemount diving as I am, he also seems to be constantly involved in super interesting projects, from his book Close Calls to his recently released video feature Infinite Liquid to co-organising the FLOW Sardinia Sidemount Event. Stratis is also a passionate sidemount rebreather diver, and he puts a massive amount of thought and work into everything he does. In this episode, Stratis and I catch up on what he's been doing since he last featured in Speaking Sidemount, episode number 38, released way back in 2019. We go deep into his must-have book Close Calls, including sharing our own experiences regarding our specific near misses, but also our motivation for sharing our stories, along with our favourites from other divers featured in the book. We can't help but muse on how the sidemount configuration actually helps some of the divers work their way out of trouble. And what would a chat with Stratis be without us talking some on the KISS Sidewinder and the recent acquisition of KISS rebreathers by the Blackwater Group, which also operates X-Deep and SEAL dry suits. Now, Stratis tells us more about Project Infinite Liquid, which documents the exploration of several Greek caves, and then we close by chatting about our upcoming plans. All this and much, much more in this episode of Speaking Sidemount. And we are recording. Stratis Kas, great to have you back on Speaking Sidemount.
It's nice to see you again. Thank you for having me back. It's been a while.
It has. What have you been up to?
Oh, we spoke before the pandemic. That is actually crazy. I think the whole thing changed for everybody, and the diving industry got affected. I don't say most than anything, but it's really one of the ones because it was so related to traveling. even on a professional, but also on a recreational level, so that it got really affected, but seems to still be here. And, people are not giving up on it. So that's good.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we've lost some really, really prominent dive businesses here in New Zealand. And I know some of my friends overseas have lost their businesses as well, which is really tragic. But what you're saying is absolutely true. I can feel this kind of pent up energy now of people who have either been out of the water for a while or haven't been able to travel. And now as we come into what is going to be 2022, I can really feel like, we've got some good things coming this year, I hope.
Yeah, I'm naturally optimistic, so I'm just gonna stick to that.
Yeah,
because I don't think we have much information to know what's going to happen. So I pretend that everything's going to be fine.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of people are looking for certainty now, and I think the only certain thing is it's going to be uncertain for a little period of time. And as you say, with a positive attitude, and we just get through this the best we can, do what we can do, be kind to each other, I think is a good one. And then let's get into it for this year. Now, when we spoke last time, it was episode 38, so that's way back. And we talked about the caves of Greece, which was awesome for me. What have you been up to in diving since then?
Well, that was, I think it was summer of 2019. So we were basically just wrapping up. And normally my regular season will bring me February of 2020 in Russia, in my usual order trip, which I actually did. And I remember, bizarrely enough, I'm not somebody who takes care of these things, but I thought I don't want to go there and lose my dives. So I bought a mask to go on this flight in Russia for the first time. I bought one of those surgical special masks. At the time was 15 cents because nobody wanted them. And returning from Russia, I landed in Bergamo, Italy when the pandemic was starting. So I flew back to Greece, and I remember it was super strange because people will hear me speaking in Italian because my mother is Italian, and they will look at me strange in the bus. I felt very marginalized because of my coming just from Italy, because it felt like anybody who would come from Italy would infect everybody else.
Yes.
And after that, it went through the first lockdown like everybody else. Then I spent the season in Sardinia, highly due to the fact that I didn't want to travel because I didn't want to take a PCR test. So I convinced myself that the diving is amazing, which was it. It was also true, but So I spent the whole summer in Sardinia there with Daniele, and so many friends came to visit because it was a good moment. People thought that it would be the end of the pandemic, so they were just starting to feel nice about it, and they were visiting often. And then we hit probably the longest European lockdown in Greece. It was really strange because on a Thursday in November, I remember I received my brand new Sidewinder on a Thursday.
Yes.
And on Friday, on Thursday, they said there's never going to be a lockdown. And on Friday, they announced. So one day after announcing it will never be a lockdown, they announced a 7-month-long lockdown.
Oh my goodness.
And it was a tough one because at some point you had to be at home at 6 p.m. You were not allowed to do any kind of sports at all. So you were not allowed to dive. Even if I would take my machine and go dive by myself, I was not allowed because it was considered an unnecessary activity.
Yes.
Like probably everywhere else. So that plus a lot of other reasons made me go to Mexico in the beginning of 2021. And that was wonderful, as it always is. And it was really, really great. In the meantime, I started receiving slowly the feedback of the book coming out, Close Calls.
Sure.
Which was, by the way, since the last time we spoke, for me, it was a reason to keep busy during the pandemic initially. I was thinking, nobody's going to go for it. Who's going to admit their mistakes, especially professionals who work in the trade as trainers or instructors? It was almost feeling like it will compromise not their status, but their security that they will provide as academics and and trainers.
Sure.
I was surprised because 90% of the people, they replied immediately. They got enthusiastic about the project, and they told me so many stories like you've seen because you've seen the book, and that actually made me re-believe a little bit in the average technical diver. So that was good.
Yeah.
And kind of that was also what kept me busy through the months after that, because my photography was getting hit really hard, especially being under lockdown. So the book was happening, it was moving around. So when I arrived in Mexico, I thought I was a little bit of a celebrity just because of the book. People will talk to me and they ask me for pictures. And I'm like,
your book is much bigger than mine, but I had the same thing here in New Zealand. People will meet you and go, are you the Steve Davis that wrote that book? And it is a good thing because you don't often make a lot of money out of these sort of exercises. So the fact that you get some recognition out of it is a very cool thing.
Yeah. No, it went really well. It still goes well. Like it still gives me the satisfaction that it's people want it. On the other side, I could never understand the kind of dimension of fame that would give me when I actually didn't write the book, because I would just collected all your stories, like your story and so many other people's stories. So often I would be like, yes, I'm the one who put the book together, but I'm not a writer by any means.
The facilitator. Yeah, exactly. There's a few things to unpack in there. I mean, one thing that I think is really interesting is you made the comment that you weren't sure whether divers would actually participate. And I think we all understand the feeling of being an instructor or a relatively high level diver, wherever you are, and wanting to look as if you don't make mistakes and wanting to look as if you're diving at a superior level and you've got everything under control all of the time, which is, of course, a complete fallacy. Nobody is impervious from making a mistake. And in fact, sometimes the more that you do things, you build this complacency. And I think certainly from my point of view, I've thought for a long, long time that I should be sharing about some of the things that go wrong. And yet you don't do it for that very reason. And having someone like you come along and create the book and say, hey, here's a platform on which you can share that story. And by the way, it's not just you. It's many, many other divers. I think it gives you some comfort because you're not on your own sharing your story. And I think that was the talent or the special spark that your creation actually made in the community, was giving us a platform by which we can share. Because it's difficult. There are no other platforms. There's a few Facebook pages and so on, but of course, that's not the place that you usually want to do that. And of course, there can be legal issues as well. So I think it was an amazing project, and I loved being part of it. I loved reading the book. There's so many different stories in there from different angles, different perspectives, different things that went wrong. I mean, you must have a few favorites. What are your favorites from the ones that you read?
Well, my favorites are mostly based on the actual narrative. It had very much to do with how much the story actually made me close my eyes and actually feel like I can imagine it happening to me. So, for example, it was also interesting to see the different way of writing of different people. Some people will take, I cannot tell you of a few actually participants that they couldn't limit themselves into the 2,000 word maximum, and they would give me a 10,000 word stories. And I'm like, it's not going to be fair to everybody who edited down, So, and then again, you have Mike Young, which is my favorite story, not so much for the story, which it's a personal favorite of mine, because reading it's short, it's to the point, and I believe his experience is very intense from that point of view. He's a CO hit, is a carbon monoxide poisoning in the cave, which is very rare. First of all, I wanted to know what happens when that happens. So it was giving me also an answer that very few people can tell you what happens and actually have a story to tell. So that was one of my favorites. I really liked, there was a story about a mine diver from Poland. That he got stuck upside down and the mine collapsed and locked his legs. And so half of his legs were above the collapse, half of his body was below the collapse. This sounds like, if you're claustrophobic, and everybody is to a certain extent, even the ones who are not, even if you're not, though, in this case, you will become one. So I remember having chills about it. Same thing with Thomas Michura's story in the ice that he got stuck. Generally, I think the stories that were speaking to me were the ones who native fear of mine, which is I'm not afraid anymore to get lost in a cave. I'm not afraid of running out of gas because I deal with it. But to have a cave collapse on me or to have a nice thing freeze on me, these are still things that I consider as scary. So those spoke to me. Which one is your favorite?
I think some of those, I mean, the Steve Bogart's one is quite similar to that as well, where he had a tie-off, which was a large stalactite, I think, collapsed. And then, of course, he lost the line. And what I enjoyed about that one, I hope I've got the story right, because I've spoken to Steve about so many stories. But what I liked about that one is he made a really big mistake, which worked out for him. But he was able to go back and, with the benefit of hindsight, come up with a better way to solve the problem. And because he spoke about it. Because he went off the line. And, as I was reading it, I think, Steve, go back. You've got to go back and get the reel that you already laid in the cave. And he didn't do that. And having been in one big one myself, obviously, that's in the book, you don't always play it out the way you would like to play it out, if you know what I mean, you know, under the intense pressure of the experience, and being able to relive it and then go back and say, gee, if that happened again, I would do it this way, is a really big learning experience as well. And I think that's, again, the benefit for people reading it who perhaps either haven't experienced near misses of this sort of magnitude. You can read them through, as you say, you know, what happens when you get a carbon monoxide hit? What happens when you get a CO2 hit? What happens when you get entangled or entrapped? What happens when you lose the line? And how have really, really good divers dealt with that in the past? And then seeing them make mistakes, but still make it out because they've been able to mentally hold themselves together most of the time is the answer, isn't it?
Yeah, and with tons of luck. So this is the one thing that people fail to recognize, that actually the divers themselves, if you read their story and you try to read the subtext of the story, you will understand that they all acknowledge a tremendous amount of luck factor that is being placed there. And very often at this level of adventure, it could be rock climbing, it could be diving is more specific because it has one bar element. Like often in diving, you will die and you'll be waiting 2 hours for this to happen. It's not just a free fall for 10 seconds. And that makes it so much more dramatic and so much more scary in a way. So if you read through the subtext, you will see that most people, they said, okay, I chose to do A instead of B, or I chose to call the dive because my heated vest didn't work. And that's why the ice was only 10 centimeters thick. It is 100% luck related.
Yes.
And years ago, I wrote an article about do not make luck your primary safety margin, you know, because you cannot always count on it. It is the most unreliable thing. When you count on luck, it's exactly that. You know, you just have to be lucky for it. But the other reason why this was successful in a way, it was that I feel like as a difference to like Facebook blogs, it was not allowing a huge chain of thousands of messages commenting, and I would have done this, I would have done that. So people felt I'm going to tell my story and that's it. And the person who will criticize me might do it in the pub, might do it in the diving shop, etc. But it won't start something that very often in the diving community ruins it when there is a right element. And then all the various comments come underneath it. Sometimes it becomes personal, sometimes it goes off subject. So the book kept the whole story in subject, and that's it.
Yeah, so that's a really good point.
It gave people the certainty that they will open up themselves, tell their own story. They can be criticized or not, but it will not create a momentum of like a market conversation, you know?
Yeah. Because we're heading on a subject there, social media, right? And I mean, it's an amazing addition to humanity almost, social media. And look, you and I are in touch through social media. I'm in touch with most of my diver friends around the world through social media, and I'm not on it a lot, but I'm certainly reviewing parts of it every day. So it's part of my everyday life. And having said that, it also has a massive dark side. And I think we're experiencing a lot of that with the pandemic right now as well, with the level of misinformation and so on that's going on, and the level of division that's being created during the pandemic. And we've seen it in various elections around the world. It's a very, very interesting beast, isn't it?
It is, because the internet in general, but specifically social media, has one factor that I disagree with it. And it's the fact that I could go on a doctor's post and post my medical theory, and I have zero consequences. Worst case scenario, it will be blocked from whatever filter that it is like fake news. And also this is very debatable, but I will not have legal consequences. Like in the past, if I will write something, because my very beginning of my career, before I was a photographer, I was flirting with journalism. So I was writing stuff, and often the text, it will go through fact checking from the legal department, because I was responsible, but also the newspaper was responsible.
Yes.
So at the end of the day, things that were not able to be fact checked, they will have to get out of the story, or even if the story was based on them, maybe the story will be killed. Right now, everybody writes whatever. And the problem is that because we tend to do this on a daily basis, and I'm as guilty as everybody else, maybe more even, we go through that and we get the information. Even me, that I'm used to the concept of fact checking, I will not do that. I have caught myself grabbing whatever point of view, it's the one that I agree with. And I'm looking basically for reassurance. Do you know what I mean?
Totally. The platform keeps delivering you more of that type of content as well, because they run on an engagement model. They want to keep you engaged in the platform, so you watch advertising. So of course it wants to keep feeding you things that will keep you on the platform.
Yeah. So doing the book and doing especially the physical book, because there was a lot of questions in the beginning when it's going to come out as an ebook, which it did for a very, very short time. But then it was a problem with the distribution because it had to go through the most major bookshop in the world, which we all know which one it is. And it became almost obligatory that in order for it to keep the online version of the book, it will have to have absolute 100% exclusivity for the printed book, which made no sense because it was running in a different model than the one that we initially wanted it to be. Anyway, long story short, it went through the ebook version for a tiny bit, then we stopped doing it. Also, I was not able to run the ebook by myself because I didn't have the know-how how to make sure that it wouldn't be just, bootlegged all around the world and everybody will have it for free. Not out of a greedy point of view, but out of the respect of the people who paid for it also.
Sure.
And then somebody gave me a brilliant idea, which I'm still flirting with it. And it would be to make a very special ebook when each diver reads its own story.
Wow. Yes.
I just want to hire you as my producer on this.
We could talk about it, but you were saying that I was thinking about how would you do that and the editing that will go in. It's not a small job, I promise you.
No, it's massive. And also it will be highly entertaining though, because, the same way that all the stories are different. Some of the stories needed to be adjusted, not many. I'm surprised of how not so many, but some of them had to be adjusted to be even understandable because some people are not speaking English as well.
Given your videography, your background and immense skills, I wonder whether this is a tour around the world to actually physically interview each of the participants and put it in video. That would be in itself really good too.
Well, like me and you discussed off the record before, there are some thoughts, and we're considering the next step for the book, which was the possibility maybe to take the concept and bring it to another subject. It's just that in that case, I'm not a specialist. I tried a little bit to understand if it could apply to mountaineering and all the disciplines of the mountain, from alpinism to free rock climbing, etc. The problem is that even more than diving, some of those disciplines, they don't have a accident ratio.
Right.
They have a live or die thing. Also, somehow all the stories that we collected, because one of the person in the book, which is Simone Villotti, I don't know if you remember his story, it was a dry cave story. He's a very active Italian diver and mountaineering. He does ice climbing and everything. So he's very connected to a lot of people who are kind of celebrities of alpinism. And all their stories, even the stories that they heard of, they kind of come down into a 4 or 5 scenario situation. Maybe it's a different altitude, maybe it's a different amount of avalanche, but eventually these are the issues. You could say the same thing about diving, but the fact that Steve can write a 6-page story about him trying to solve a problem, as bad as it is in real life that you actually go through the agony for like a long time before you end up actually, not making it, it gives you the time that if you will make it, you have a narrative to tell.
Yes.
While the alpinist will be like, and then the hook came off and I felt, but thank God the second hook held, and that's a story.
Yes. Yeah.
It doesn't make a story. So we stop it there, but then thought maybe we can turn it into something that will include video as well. And it's something that we are looking into it right now with some of the elements that are in the book who are professionals also of the visual profession in a way. So I think by middle next year, we will know where this is going. What I want to say, and I have said that in many interviews that I have done about the book, because the moment the book came out, a lot of interest came from different blogs, etc., which I'm very, very thankful. And is I just want to extend for once more a huge thank you to all the people that helped make the book. And like I said at the beginning of the story, all the people who tell their stories, disregarding completely, because nobody came to me shy. Nobody came to me asking to kind of have a look at the final draft, how you edit it, etc. It almost felt like they wanted to get it off their chest, and that's it. Then, of course, you remember that I was sending to everybody the layout to be approved, etc. But I did it. Nobody asked me for it. And it wasn't the fact that they didn't know how the business works. It felt really honest that they just wanted to tell their story, and it was finally I have to tell the story. This brings me back to what you mentioned before. Okay, this close call happened to you, the one that you have in the book with the wreck, and another one happened to me, which is probably minor comparing to most of the close calls. That's also another point. Everybody's close call, if it feels like a close call, is like the worst day of your life. So what happened is that I remember not wanting to talk about it, but not so much because I had something to hide from the community, or even not to scare my girlfriend or my mother, which had a little bit a part of it. Yeah. We don't want to over stigmatize our already stigmatized, scary hobby.
Yes.
But it was mostly me that I wanted to remove this moment as a memory from my own emotional map, let's say. I never wanted to remember that me for an hour and a half, I thought that I would die. And I emphasize this. It is very different. Whoever had a car accident knows how it is. You're driving, in 3 seconds, something happens, and then you are alive. And you're like, okay, I just crossed the train lines and the train almost hit me, but it didn't. It took 3 seconds.
Yes.
Here we're talking that you are chained in the train line, the car is stuck there, and you cannot open the doors for an hour and a half.
Yes.
It is the most agonizing sensation I have experienced, and that I imagine you can have. So I probably never spoke about it because I wanted to completely remove it from my memories. And a lot of people that I spoke to them about it, they confirmed that. So how was it for you? Because I'm actually curious.
I agree with you completely. And I had the same experience. Almost immediately I got back to the boat, I wanted to share with somebody. In fact, I don't remember my first words exactly, but I remember saying things like, oh, that was really interesting. Everyone looked at me and said, what happened? And I said, I got stuck at the back of the boiler room in a place that I hadn't been before, that I certainly shouldn't have gone. And of course, our team had been separated. So there was some awareness of I had been away by myself for a period of time, and nobody really knew what happened at that point. And then there was a colleague of mine, a very senior instructor, that I sort of talked through what happened. And that was quite helpful. You would say things like, did you think about doing this? And did you think about doing that? And of course, for most of them, I didn't. And these were alternative strategies that you could have employed in the light of day after the accident has happened, with the benefit of hindsight. I certainly didn't want to tell my family because, as you said, you don't want them to worry about you. And as we know, our sport is reasonably safe if we follow the rules, and bad luck can get us, as you said also. I was very reluctant to do that, but I think the act of writing it is quite therapeutic in the end, because you get to relive the experience and you get to kind of bring it out and get all the emotions out. And I think, as you rightly pointed out, the best stories in there are the ones where the emotional side is also dealt with, the feelings that we went through. And sure, there was some dread, and then some moments of near panic, and then some moments of lucidness where I'm solving this problem, and then moments of despair where your solution's not working and you go back to solving the problem again. And of course, there's a high element of stress, and there's potentially CO2 issues, and there's potentially poor responses due to the way that you're dealing with the issue. And as you rightly say, it was a really good way to therapeutically get it out in the open and draw a line under it. And I think I certainly feel better about the event now. And of course, as you pointed out too, my one was, I read Andy Torbett's one, and I thought, oh my God, that man was down to his last breath, water flooding his helmet, and he was going to die. This wasn't a 2-hour thing. This was a very traumatic few minutes, I guess, or seconds even. And mine wasn't really like that. I was going to have a long period of time stuck there if I didn't solve the problem until I ran out of gas and drowned. So I kind of felt as if mine wasn't as dramatic from that point of view. And you're the first one to point out to me that the fact that you're there for a long period of time actually isn't necessarily good for you mentally, is it?
No, it magnifies, if you don't have a solution, it magnifies the experience, which, people can say, who cares, you're going to die anyway, but it doesn't work like that. Everybody, together with other things of our daily life, one of our common wishes that you will find everybody wishing for themselves and their loved ones is like, I would like to die standing, or I would like to die in my sleep, which means I don't want the process of realization. Dying in my sleep is not because it's comfortable. It's like so that I won't realize I'm dying. And, yes, his helmet was filling up, but I felt like 2 hours. even if it was just a minute or two.
Yes, agreed.
It probably felt like a very long time, because I spoke to Andy after that many times, and he's like, the time, it was probably 10 times faster in reality than how it felt. And, yeah, that was a good story too.
And I thought, geez, but mine's completely chicken shit compared to this. But as you say, everyone has their own experience. And also, I think the other thing that is pertinent to this is where you are in your diving career. I mean, being entrapped like that now or entangled wouldn't be such a big deal for me anymore. And partly it's more experience, partly it's having gone through the experience and being able to think it through. And of course, you get better. And Steve Bogart's talked about that a lot when I've spoken to him several times now. It's about building your comfort zone, and progressively as you build your dive career and you go through what are sometimes negative experiences, that becomes part of your bank of knowledge. Certainly that event wouldn't bother me so much now. But of course, there'd be another closely related event that might, so you never know.
Yeah, often with experience, you transform a close call into a discomfort.
Yes.
But another thing that was nice in the book is that we had a lot of very, very, very experienced and very advanced divers with decades of experience, that they will bring us their close call something from the beginning of their career, or not because they wanted to say, I was young and silly. It was interesting to see divers like Peggy Kagan-Scott, that she would talk about the fact that she gave a lesson that I actually was not following strictly, but after that, and it kind of made it the point that I'm actually trying to follow now. Like she's told, do not use new pieces of equipment on serious dives. And that is more valuable than one more story of having a classic failure happening to you. So whenever a story was coming out, and it was a story that didn't fit the standard expected story from this person, I think that also made the book more interesting, because she might not even remember that story until she got confronted with remember a moment that you actually worried. You know what I mean? So
totally.
There is a lot of variety in the book. I'm very, very lucky to receive this variety of stories, because at the beginning I was also concerned, I'm going to receive the classic ones. I was underweighted, I was this, but there is a good type of variety. There is people lost in mines, and it was, again, I'm very, very thankful, and I'm feeling extremely blessed. Also, I feel extremely blessed because many of those divers I met for the first time because of the book, and many of them were my heroes or my idols, or eventually at least people that I would like to get in touch with at some point, because I was looking up to them, and the book gave me this opportunity. So it was great. And remember, this book is everybody's book, is not my book. So I'm thankful also to you.
I just think it was a stellar project, and I still do. And for those of you who are listening, if you don't have a copy of this book, Stratis, how can we get a copy now? I bought it so long ago, I can't remember now.
Things got better, by the way, because in the beginning, as a non-professional publisher, I went, like I do in all the projects of my life, I went extreme. So I wanted to be zero impact on the environment. So the best way to do it was to actually print whatever was requested. So I found one printer in the UK, and they had 3 offices. They were in the UK, in America, and in Australia. So that will also reduce the shipping. So you will order a book, let's say, I will send the order, the book will be printed. That generated an incredible amount of cost. That's why the book is also so expensive.
Sure.
But there is no stock. Every month and a half, every 2 months, the book goes out of stock, because we're waiting for the paper to come in, all this stuff. Not printing 10,000 books in one go also doesn't allow you to buy in bulk. Therefore, the paper you buy it almost at retail prices. But it's all worth it because we have zero waste. At the beginning, though, because of that, we were unlucky, and I don't want to mention names, even though I should, because eventually they were like a disaster, and they shouldn't. There was a very famous international shipping company that actually lost 30 to 40% of my stock, maybe 50% of my stock. So you will be in Germany, you will order a book, the book will be sent to you, they will not notify you, they will try to come to your house, they will ring the bell. If you were not there, they will send it back to England. They will charge me £45 for every returning book. £45 was more than the cost of the book. And then obviously, because you paid it, you wanted me to send it back to you. So in the beginning, I have to say that 80% of the book that was actually sold was at loss, at least twice the price of what it would have been gained in a way. Point
Oh.
was never to make money out of that, so I didn't mind, but it was very frustrating. And a lot of people, 90% of the people who bought the book, incredibly honored from the fact that they understood all that. They knew that I was not a publisher, so some of them were like calling me 6 months after and said, I ordered it in September. Any idea? And it was like end of May.
So
and I'm
nice.
like, you should have taken it by now, Eventually down the road, I stopped all that. I moved all of the production in Greece.
Mm-hmm.
And we keep the same story. We print small numbers and only on demand. So we gather pre-orders. And then when we have, let's say, 100 orders, we print. But now we're using another company, which is another international. I don't know if I'm allowed to say brands on the show, am I?
That's fine. Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, we use DHL, and I'm actually want to say it because they have been proven in more than 500 shippings that we did recently. They might have had a couple of issues, which they were not even related to them losing the book. It was more of a customs issue, etc., etc. So
sure,
people are getting their book very easily now. It's ordered exclusively through my website. And the reason why is because we have this process of small numbers. So we gather the orders, and then when they're ready, we ship everything together.
Sure.
So on the website, which, I don't know if you want to mention it or if you can mention it.
Yes, please. Yeah, please do.
The website is Stratis Kas, which is STRATIS, like my full name, .com. It has a special tab where you can go and see the status, if it's on pre-order, if it's on shipping time, and order with PayPal, and it will get to you. The longest wait that we have now is 1 month. So if you order just when the orders have finished shipping, averagely it will take 1 month. But for example, the orders that got ordered today, they will ship next Monday. So
perfect.
It got to be more streamlined.
I mean, we learn with experience, don't we? And I've been through the same thing with the print on demand for my book. And actually, I'm out of stock now, so I do need to order some more. And what I tended to do to solve that problem is I buy a bunch, buy 20, 30 at a time, and then bring them in and I carry some stock and ship them myself. But it's a much smaller run book than yours. And I've been through the dramas of what happens with them. So well done for solving the problems. That link for Stratis's website, I'll put it in the podcast notes. So if anyone would like to get a copy, and again, I highly recommend making this one of the most prominent books on your bookshelf, because it's an absolute ripping read and there's a lot to learn from what's in there as well. Thanks for sharing again on the book. Is there more on the book?
Well, being that this is Speaking Sidemount, and
yes.
I am as much as a Sidemount fanatic as you are, if that's even possible, even though, because recently I've been hearing your latest podcast that just came out, and you were mentioning that you might be one of the only people in the world that doesn't know what is a back-mounted doubles.
Yes, I learned a lot from that day, actually, because I had deliberately not dived to twin set. I've dived obviously a single, but then throwing one on and going for a dive and realizing that it was no big deal and that I actually could easily dive it was such an interesting experience for me, because I've seen really good rebreather divers and back mount doubles divers put on a side mount harness and some cylinders, and I've seen them dive quite well very quickly. I've taught a couple of very prominent divers. They pick it up very fast if they're shown correctly how to do it, of course.
So talking about it, there is a lot of side mount in the book. And the thing is that a lot of the stories, we don't realize that a lot of the close calls are simply close calls, probably because of their side mount.
Yes.
But this requires a much further analysis, and it's not about protecting one system or one configuration towards another. It's just that at some point, because of my personal preference, I wanted to go deeper into that. And I thought, okay, let's see if this was, well, you can never tell because you're not in the environment yourself, but I was trying to guess what would be the difference if in this case, he or she had this kind of configuration. And there is a few moments that I can almost certainly say that this would have not been survivable, or it would have been way, way worse. So you will need much more help from luck to make it if it was any other configuration. And this is also why I know we're also both big fans of the Sidewinder. It's the same thing. It's like, it feels like all the benefits are there.
You're absolutely right. And I feel naked. I certainly don't like diving single cylinder anymore. It just feels abhorrent to me from the point of view that there's no redundancy whatsoever. In fact, your redundancy is either the surface or a buddy who hopefully is paying attention to you. So diving side mount, to me, just having that independent gas source redundancy is amazing. But then wrapping that onto the Sidewinder where you've got a diluent, just a standard setup of a diluent and a bailout cylinder, both side mounted, both independent. You may have consumed some diluent on the dive, but effectively you've got 2 cylinders of gas as your bailout if you need it. And again, they're both independent. It's such a stellar setup in terms of being able to withstand a failure of your unit. And then you have to ask yourself, how does a Sidewinder fail? As Ed Sorensen said to me, he's flooded his unit virtually completely, deliberately to see what happens.
Yeah, I remember that.
And early on in my diving on the Sidewinder, certainly the first one, I got back in the water after I'd been out of the water for a while, and I did a stupid thing. I took the DSV out of my mouth without closing it. And I don't think very much water went in, but a little bit went in. And I just followed the drill, tipped the water into the can, and then think, well, how does this feel? And it felt fine. I'd certainly curbed my intentions for that dive, but I didn't feel the need to call it. It just withstood that issue. And of course you can get a flood, but the fact that you've got 2 independent cans, you've got a counterlung between the 2 of them, trying to get water to pass from one side all the way across the counterlung to the other side to hit your electronics is really difficult. It's just a very well thought out, well built, simple, functional. And at the end of the day, for me, the fact that it fits on top of my side mount system means that it's very comfortable. And I've had 2 occasions now where I've had to go, I can't dive the Sidewinder today. And in less than 3-4 minutes, I've been able to strip the Sidewinder off and go for an open circuit side mount dive.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
So, and I've seen many people with failures on units that we won't name, but it's certainly ECCRs. They have a failure and that's it. They're out of the water and there's no option for them.
No, and also the Sidewinder, it is suitable for extreme optimization of weighting because because the moment that we all dread is that when we have to bail out, and if you're considering the gas of the cylinders, especially if you're diving aluminum as part of your weight, you might have to actually flood it. If you don't bail out for flooding and you bail out for whatever reason, you might have to intentionally flood the unit in order to keep your weight where it is in order not to actually surface.
Great.
And flooding the Sidewinder, which we all have done it, purposely or not. I haven't done it on purpose, but I have flooded it completely in Angelita, Mexico. It is a very, very, very resistant, simple unit that you can actually clean yourself, put it back together and be back in the water. Patrick is discussing how he had to do it and he was back in the water in 45 minutes. People didn't even have to get out of they were in the water. He came out, prepared everything, put new sorb, everything went in the water again. It is a huge benefit, but it's also the fact that I can put it on a backpack and travel for a weekend somewhere, and it feels it's really, really, really portable.
Yeah, and when I first heard about the Sidewinder, or at least one of the early discussions was with Michael Thomas at the Cave Diving Group, and the way that he was using it was for dry caving, right? So he's walking the Sidewinder into a cave and doing a series of single rope technique aspects of his penetration of the dry cave to then hit a sump. And the Sidewinder is ideal for that sort of thing. Again, you could wear it virtually the entire time, deal with your cylinders as they normally do. You can use really small cylinders if you want to. Only use 7-liter cylinders. So it's built for that sort of thing. I've got some ideas of things that I want to do where I need to walk through what is effectively a jungle for 45 minutes to get to a sinkhole that I'm aware of that I don't think anyone's explored. I'm sure Patrick and others have been doing that already in Madagascar and other places. So it's just made for that sort of thing as well. Yeah,
it is a lightweight unit that rarely, if not never, truly fails unless you don't take care of it. And when it does, you have options. So but it requires a thinking diver. So this is also why I like it, because I think that diving is safe only when you're aware of everything, and the Sidewinder will not fix problems for you.
No,
you will have to be aware, and some of the things that you have to be aware are even the simple fact that you will be able to feel when the flooding that you have accidentally or not happened to you is going to pass through your canister, and then when it progressively passes through your counterlungs and you feel it on your back every time you breathe. Then when you stop feeling it, you know that it's progressing through the other canister, and it might be just about time that you have to call the dive or at least bail out. So it's a very sensation-based unit, which is beautiful. And now, of course, with X-Deep and the new collaboration.
What do you think about that?
I knew about it for a long time, but like everything that X-Deep does is not something that they just throw it on the market like that, and they want to be very ready. I think it's great because the concept is wonderful, and I think what Mike and the people from X-Deep did to come together, also with the fact that Patrick is such a big promoter of the machine and he's the number one fan. It has also very much to do with the fact that they took the best of both worlds. In one case, you have the genius of the design idea, which was not even meant to be commercialized initially, so it was meant to be a solution for a specific diver that had specific need. Yes. And then Mike just simply said, if it works for somebody who has a limitation, physical limitation, imagine for a person who doesn't. And actually, that's how it happened. And now to take somebody like X-Deep that does things in a more factory-like with more high-end materials. And it was the only thing, having the Sidewinder, the only problem that I ever felt, which was mental, because I never had a problem, is that at some point it felt that it was a little too fragile.
Sure.
Sometimes the things that you had to screw or people you had to insert, they felt it was a lot of plastic on plastic contact. But also because of that, it's its weight. So I'm waiting to see the new version.
And I should have introed this whole discussion a little better. So what's actually physically happened? I spoke about it in the intro to the last episode. There's a group called the Blackwater Group that has collectively got together, and I don't even know enough again about who's involved in that. But of course, there's X-Deep, Patrick Woodman, that encapsulates all of the X-Deep range. Then there's SEAL dry suits, which I haven't seen physically, but I've seen online, certainly with the guys at ProTech diving them. And have you got one?
I have no idea. I have one, and you can go back.
All right. So that's definitely on my Christmas list. And then, of course, as we've been talking, very dear to our hearts is Kas rebreathers, in particular the Sidewinder in our side mount context. And I guess the Sidekick is in there as well. Having them become involved with the Blackwater Group through an acquisition and having this entire group working together now for manufacturing and marketing and so on is just immense, I think, to divers like us. And I think it's immense because we've got now some of the very best products coming together under one banner where they can share technology, as you were talking about, manufacturing expertise coming from Pieter and the team at X-Deep, and bringing that into. Mike has already done a stellar job. Of course, you can always be improved. And then the thing that I think personally for me that was missing, not so much for me, but for European divers, is the fact that they're going to take it through CE certification. And so now it's got all of the things that it needs from a regulatory point of view to be sold properly in Europe, which just opens up the entire European market for this device now.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping to see more things globally. And then, add on top of that, Patrick's input. Ed Sorensen's done just an amazing job, but bringing someone like Patrick alongside that, where he's going to help with the instructional side of it, how we're going to train instructors, what's the factory training going to look like, and getting some sort of consistency built in there. I think it really bodes extremely well for all of the products. And there is a very natural connection between all of them. And so I'm super excited about it.
Yeah, it's a great product waiting just to become better. The only thought that I have, I really, really wish, and I don't know if it's even physically possible, that it will not compromise its actual weight. Yes. I know that many of the things are done in Delrin now, and we have to see. And I also would like to see, hopefully, and I don't know if the people can hear me at Blackwater or Patrick or somebody else, maybe to find the solution regarding the insulation of the actual canister.
Yes.
Because my canisters have the insulation, but I have to tell you, I still feel a tiny bit concerned in water that is below 8 degrees.
Sure.
I am more careful, and I should be anyway, but I'm probably not obsessing, but I'm probably focusing a little bit too much on that factor. I know there's other people like Scott that have been doing big dives on 4-degree water. Yeah. I would like to see more technical and proper information, maybe out of certification of what it is able to withstand.
Yeah, that's been missing. And there was some debate around the canister volumes as well in terms of different types of sorb, which I think just needs to be tidied up as well. There is the heated canister option I'm aware of as well, but I don't know how that works. And certainly I'm a warm water diver, so I haven't really been exploring anything. But I guess for order, that would be what you're looking for, right?
Yeah, order has the benefit that the dives are not massive in duration time. And at any point, you will be able to come back with a bailout, especially a bailout the size of what the Sidewinder traditionally carries with it.
Sure.
So that's okay. But I'm talking about purely not considering the environment. Okay, this environment will forgive me in case I have to bail out because it doesn't work anymore because of the cold. I'm one of those people, I would like to have the official statement that, we tested it at 4 degrees without the heated thing. This will hold so much gas for so many hours.
Everything's anecdotal at the moment, isn't it? And so you hear lots of stories from people, but there's nothing official. And as you say, the CE testing may clear some of this up for us. So Stratis, one of the things I love about you is you always have super interesting projects in play. And I mean, one of the things that you and I spoke about when we first met was your feature movie, Infinite Liquid. And I'm so excited to be involved with you and to be supporting you on that project. Can you tell us a little bit about where it's at right now?
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. Like we said at the beginning of the podcast, we spoke, it was summer of 2019, and we were just finished filming this project, Infinite Liquid, which was an exploratory and introductory project for the Greek caves to the rest of the world, which have been my motivation in all the projects that I've been doing, being from Greece and having all that natural beauty. It was the one project that was supported also from the XT people with their products. And then we were supposed to present it at Tech Dive USA in the spring of the next year. But, then the pandemic hit and it hit another time on the next year. And because of that, a little bit the excuse of that, a little bit the laziness that somehow hit also with the lockdown, and, you were not really having heavy motivation. A little bit the book that we talked before, it took it off the radar. And now I decided that, I need, in respect of all the people who were involved, the cinematographers, the people who were doing the drones, etc., but also because of the value of the product, we're relaunching it. And therefore we're finishing the film, which is just below half an hour movie that brings more knowledge and with some really spectacular visuals to the cave diving in Greece in 3 different locations. And it will be available beginning of the year on my website and in other platforms for people to see it. And hopefully everybody will like it. So
I've had a sneak peek of it. Obviously, I'm doing the narration and I'm very proud to be involved in the project. And I can tell you the cinematography is just absolutely unbelievable. But on top of that, the diving, if you're a Sidemount diver, seeing divers of this level explore caves is just something to behold. And then the caves themselves are just magnificent. So yeah, I can't wait to see how this project rolls out and really excited to be involved in it.
Cool. And thank you. I'm very thankful. It's nice to have good people on the team, and I'm very thankful that you are part of
that. Cheers, my friend. Well, look, I have to wrap this up and I'm on a tight time frame today, and Stratis and I could talk for hours. We'll definitely get you back on the show again. We've always got something to talk about Sidemount and cave diving. Thank you so much for joining me today. Thanks for chatting about close calls, and great to relive some of our experiences from both within the book and seeing it go out into the world. An amazing project. Again, congratulations on that.
Thank you so much. It's been fantastic talking to you again, like always. And I'll talk to you soon because we have to do this narration, like you said.
Indeed we do. Thanks very much, Stratis.
Okay. Have a good day.
Hey, thanks so much for listening. I hope you got as much out of this episode as I did. It was phenomenal to catch up with Stratis again and share on his amazing book, Close Calls. If you don't have a copy, do yourself a favor. Please pick one up as soon as you can. It's available through Stratis's website, and I'll have the address in the podcast notes. Also, Project Infinite Liquid, if you haven't seen it yet, pop and have a look at that as well. It's a great visual of the exploration of Greek caves that Stratis and his friends carried out. Again, thanks so much for listening. Thank you to XDeep and the patrons of Speaking Sidemount for all of your support. If you'd like to become a patron, then check out all of the information. It's at patreon.com/Speaking Sidemount. You can also find a link in the podcast notes. Thanks again for listening, and I'll catch you in the next episode. You've been listening to Speaking Sidemount from www.sidemountpros.com. If you like the podcast, please subscribe and consider leaving us a 5-star review. If there's something you'd like us to cover on the show, then let us know via our Facebook page listed in the podcast notes. Thanks again, and we look forward to you joining us on our next episode of Speaking Sidemount.